The biting wind howled like a banshee outside, rattling the old window panes of the secluded cabin. Inside, 22-year-old Amelia stirred a pot of chicken soup, her breath misting in the warm air. The aroma of herbs and simmering broth filled the small kitchen, momentarily masking the growing unease in her heart. Amelia glanced at the old grandfather clock ticking away in the corner, its rhythmic cadence a stark contrast to the growing chaos outside. The wind howled again, this time with a vengeance, and the once gentle snowfall morphed into a blinding whiteout in a matter of minutes. Fear, cold and sharp, began to creep into Amelia's heart, replacing her earlier confidence with a growing sense of dread. The storm raged on, a relentless beast determined to swallow the world outside. Amelia retreated from the window, the storm's fury a stark reminder of her isolation. The once cozy cabin now felt like a prison, the silence between the wind's howls amplifying every creak and groan of the old house. She tried to distract herself, pulling a worn copy of Jane Eyre from the bookshelf, but the words swam before her eyes. A sudden thud from upstairs shattered the silence. Amelia froze, her blood turning to ice. The sound came again, a soft scraping noise, like something dragging across the wooden floor. Amelia's mind raced, desperately trying to rationalize the sounds. It was an old house, she reasoned, prone to strange noises, especially in such a storm. But deep down, a primal instinct whispered a different story. Clutching the poker like a lifeline, she slowly made her way to the foot of the stairs. The scraping sound continued, intermittent now, but closer. As she reached the first step, a guttural growl echoed from the top of the stairs. The growl, primal and guttural, seemed to reverberate through Amelia, shaking her to her core. Her grip tightened on the iron poker, its cold metal offering little comfort against the unseen terror lurking above. The scraping sound had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow more unnerving. Amelia's breath caught in her throat, her mind a whirlwind of fear-driven thoughts. She couldn't stay rooted to this spot, paralyzed by terror. She had to act, to find a way to protect herself. Taking a shaky breath, Amelia forced herself to move, her bare feet silent on the cold wooden steps. She crept up the stairs, each step a monumental effort against the tide of fear threatening to consume her. Reaching the top of the stairs, Amelia found herself facing a long, narrow hallway. The darkness within seemingly deeper than the storm-ravaged night outside. The single flickering light bulb at the far end of the hallway did little to penetrate the oppressive gloom, casting long, dancing shadows that twisted familiar shapes into menacing figures. She strained to hear anything over the pounding of her own heart, any indication of what might be lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing, only the oppressive silence and the growing feeling that she was being watched. Her eyes darted from shadow to shadow, her mind conjuring up images of unseen horror. She had to know what she was dealing with, even if the knowledge brought with it a new level of terror. Step by cautious step, Amelia moved down the hallway, her back pressed against the wall, the iron poker held before her like a talisman against the unseen. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight, each creak echoing in the suffocating silence. She reached the doorway to her grandparents' bedroom, the door slightly ajar. A cold draft emanated from the room, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and vaguely sweet. Her hand trembled as she pushed the door open, the old hinges groaning in protest. Amelia's heart pounded against her ribs, her breath catching in her throat as she surveyed the room, searching for any sign of movement. The storm outside seemed to intensify, the wind howling like a banshee as if angered by Amelia's intrusion. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the room for a fleeting moment, followed by a deafening clap of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. And then Amelia saw it, a faint glimmer of light reflecting off something in the far corner of the room. As she drew closer, the faint glimmer resolved itself into a small silver object lying on the floor next to the window. With trembling hands, Amelia picked up the frame, her breath catching in her throat as she turned it over. Amelia's breath hitched, a gas escaping her lips as she stared at the photograph. The woman in the picture, her features obscured by fear and shadow, held a silver frame identical to the one Amelia now held. The image was unsettlingly familiar, a chilling reflection staring back at her from the depths of the storm-ravaged night. The metallic scent from before, now stronger, seemed to emanate from the photograph itself, clinging to Amelia's senses like a ghostly residue. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm echoing the escalating chaos outside. The woman in the picture, her eyes wide with a terror that transcended time and circumstance, seemed to lock eyes with Amelia. Amelia's mind, overwhelmed by the implications of the photograph, struggled to make sense of the situation. Was this some cruel joke, a macabre prank left behind by her grandparents? Or was there something more, something sinister at play, something that defied logic and reason? Her gaze darted between the two frames, the one in her hand and the one held by the terrified woman in the photograph. The similarity was undeniable, the unsettling feeling of recursion sending chills down her spine. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, the sound like fingernails scraping against glass. Amelia jumped, her heart pounding in her chest. Amelia forced herself to take a deep breath, the cold air stinging her lungs. She had to get a grip. Panic wouldn't help her. She needed to think clearly, to find a way out of this nightmare. But the fear, insidious and pervasive, clouded her thoughts, whispering doubts and conjuring up terrifying possibilities. The storm outside seemed to intensify, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. The silence, broken only by the relentless howling of the wind and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs, pressed in on Amelia. She knew she couldn't stay huddled in her grandparents' room forever, held captive by fear and unanswered questions. She had to confront the unknown, to seek answers in the heart of the storm that raged both outside and within. Rising to her feet, Amelia took a deep breath, steeling her nerves. Clutching the iron poker in one hand and the silver picture frame in the other, Amelia stepped out of the room and into the darkened hallway. Ahead lay only darkness and uncertainty. But Amelia knew, with a certainty that defied logic and reason, that she was not alone. The old house twisted around Amelia as she ventured deeper into its darkened heart. Each room felt like a step further into a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. The air grew heavy with unseen eyes, the silence broken by creaking floors. She moved like a phantom, her bare feet silent on the cold floors. The iron poker in her hand offered little comfort against the unseen terror. The silver picture frame felt cold, a reminder of the nightmare. The storm outside raged, mocking her plight. The old house groaned under the storm's assault. Amelia pressed on, hoping to find answers within the labyrinthine house. She reached the attic door, set at the end of a narrow hallway. The air was thick with decay and a metallic scent like old blood. A shiver ran down her spine, warning her to turn back. Taking a deep breath, Amelia pushed the attic door open. The hinges groaned in protest. The attic was cluttered with remnants of generations past. Cobwebs hung from every rafter. Dust motes danced in the moonlight. The air was thick with the scent of decay and dust. Amelia stepped inside, her senses on high alert. She pressed on, drawn deeper by an unseen force. She moved cautiously through the labyrinth of forgotten treasures. Old furniture loomed out of the darkness. Trunks sat gathered in the center, emanating forgotten stories. A sudden gust of wind rattled the boarded-up windows. Amelia spun around, her heart pounding. But there was nothing there, only shadows and silence. Amelia's gaze fell upon a large, ornately framed mirror propped against the far wall. Its surface was tarnished with age, revealing the dark void beneath. She approached it cautiously, drawn to its faded elegance. As she drew closer, she noticed something strange. Her reflection shifted and distorted, taking on a life of its own. The face that stared back was not her own, but a terrified visage. Amelia stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. The mirror's surface rippled like water, pulsing with unseen energy. The air crackled with static, the scent of something ancient filling her nostrils. The reflection reached out, its hand a grotesque parody of her own. Amelia cried out, a sound of pure terror. She turned to flee, but the room shifted and distorted, blocking her escape. The storm outside reached a deafening crescendo, the wind howling like a banshee, the old house groaning under the onslaught. The boarded-up windows rattled violently, threatening to give way under the assault. The temperature plummeted, the air growing heavy with the scent of snow and ice. The mirror, its surface now a swirling vortex of light and shadow, pulsed with an eerie light. The reflection of the terrified woman grew stronger, her features becoming clearer, her expression one of pure, unadulterated terror. Amelia could feel its gaze upon her, cold and calculating, like the gaze of a predator sizing up its prey. She stumbled back, her hand reaching out to steady herself. Her fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. She looked down to see a small silver picture frame lying on the dusty floor. It was identical to the one she held in her hand, the one depicting the terrified woman and her own reflection. Amelia's mind reeled, struggling to make sense of the impossible. The mirror, the photographs, the storm, it was all connected somehow. She was trapped in a nightmare, a terrifying loop from which there seemed to be no escape. The reflection in the mirror stepped out, becoming flesh and blood. Her eyes burned with an eerie light, her features twisted in terror and rage. She moved with an unnatural grace, her gaze fixed on Amelia. Amelia raised the iron poker, her only weapon. But deep down she knew it was futile. This was no ordinary intruder. This was something ancient and evil, feeding on fear and isolation. The woman from the mirror stopped inches from Amelia. Her breath was icy cold, her touch sending a jolt of fear. "You cannot escape," the apparition whispered. "You are mine now. You will become a part of this house forever." The apparition's words struck Amelia like a physical blow. Her grip tightened on the iron poker, her knuckles turning white. The temperature plummeted as if the blizzard had invaded the attic. "No," Amelia gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "I won't let you take me." But her words dissipated into the oppressive atmosphere. The woman from the mirror only smiled, an ancient evil beyond comprehension. Amelia lunged, swinging the iron poker with all her might. But the apparition moved with unnatural speed, dodging the blow. Amelia stumbled, her heart pounding against her ribs. "You cannot fight fate," the apparition hissed. "You are already mine." The woman from the mirror lunged, her icy fingers closing around Amelia's wrist. Amelia cried out, the sound swallowed by the howling wind. She struggled, but her strength was no match for the unearthly power. The silver picture frame slipped from Amelia's grasp, landing on the dusty attic floor. The image of the terrified woman seemed to stare up at her. Amelia's gaze darted from the fallen frame to the mirror. Her reflection began to morph, taking on the terrified visage of the woman in the photograph. "No!" Amelia screamed, her voice raw with terror. "This can't be happening. But her pleas fell on deaf ears, swallowed by the storm. The attic grew colder, the air thick with the scent of ozone and decay. Amelia felt a sharp, pulling sensation, as if an invisible hand were drawing her towards the mirror's surface. She thrashed against the unseen force, her fingers scrabbling for purchase on the dusty attic floor, but her efforts were futile. The pull was too strong, the allure of the spectral realm too powerful to resist. Her reflection, now a perfect duplicate of the terrified woman in the photograph, reached out from the mirror's depths, her fingers brushing against Amelia's cheek with an icy touch that sent shivers down her spine. Amelia closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. A single thought, a desperate plea for escape, flickered through Amelia's mind in those final moments before the darkness consumed her entirely. She pictured the silver picture frame lying on the attic floor, its surface reflecting the faint glow of the moon filtering through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. If she could only reach it, touch the cold, smooth surface of the glass, perhaps she could break free from the mirror's grasp, shatter the illusion that held her captive. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, Amelia reached out, her fingers stretching, straining towards the fallen frame. The blizzard raged on, its fury unabated, blanketing the isolated house in a shroud of white. Inside, the attic was silent, the air thick with the lingering scent of ozone and a strange metallic tang. The ornately framed mirror stood against the far wall, its surface dark and empty, reflecting nothing but the faint glow of the moon filtering through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. On the dusty attic floor, a single silver picture frame lay forgotten, its surface coated in a fine layer of dust. The image it held, once a portrait of youthful innocence, now depicted a scene of unspeakable terror. A young woman, her features contorted in a silent scream, her eyes wide with a fear that seemed to reach out from beyond the grave. But something was different. The glass covering the photograph was shattered, a spiderweb of cracks radiating outward from a single point of impact. In the image itself, the terrified woman, frozen in a moment of eternal fear, seemed to have changed. Her eyes, once filled with a chilling awareness, now reflected a chilling emptiness, as if whatever force had animated her had moved on. Days later, as the blizzard subsided, a search party arrived at the isolated house. They found the house eerily silent, doors and windows locked from the inside. Amelia's grandparents were safe but shaken. Amelia was gone. The authorities conducted a thorough investigation, but no trace of Amelia was found. The storm had claimed another victim, its secrets buried beneath the snow. The old house, a silent witness, held its secrets. It stood for generations, a haunting reminder of storms within and without.